We'll call the meeting to order. May I ask that you stand for the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I understand there are no additions or deletions to the agenda.
That's correct.
Correct. Public comments for any topic that is not on the agenda? There being none, I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes as submitted of the last meeting.
I make a motion to approve the minutes of the Planning and Zoning Board of June 1st, 2020, as written.
Second.
Accepted. We have an application for special exemption.
Sorry, did everyone vote on the minutes?
Yes,
Did I
it
get-
was unanimous, I'm sorry. Have an application for special exemption use request for a planned unit development that will feature 11 2- and 3-story residential structures totaling 22 units, residential units. The subject property consists of a vacant parcel of 3.88 acres in size and has a land use designation of medium density residential and a zoning designation of residential multiple family medium density. Staff presentation.
Mr. Chairman, before we start, it is quasi-judicial, so everyone really should be sworn in who's going to testify on this matter. So anyone who's planning to speak, if you just raise your right hand. Anybody?
The owner on Zoom, so
So have him raise the right hand on Zoom.
he's on call-in Zoom.
Oh, Collins, all right. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, for the record, I'm Kurt Thompson, Principal Planner for the Town of Juno Beach, and I will be presenting this case to you. As the chairman has said, this is an 11 two-family residential project request for planned unit development, PUD special exception, and site plan review. Now, the vacant parcel, this parcel has been vacant since 2007. The current owner is FDC Juno Beach LLC, which is also the applicant for this request. Can you hear me? Okay. I'll bring it closer. Okay. The zoning district designation is residential multiple family medium density RM1. And this was formerly known as the Seminole Ridge subdivision. The prior approval under the Seminole Ridge subdivision was for a 31 townhomes, which was not built. There were two reasons for that. The first reason was that the economy had had a downturn, and the second reason was that the approval had expired after 2 years. What you have here on the map here is to the north is the Old Town single-family residential development, which consists of 8 dwelling units. You have Ocean One, the project here. To the south is Juno Dunes, which consists of 48 townhomes. To the east, this is Ocean Drive, and then you have Kagan Park here, and this little corner here represents Pelican Lake. To the west, you have US Highway 1, and then you have environmentally sensitive lands owned by Palm Beach County. Okay. Now I want to talk a little bit about the request for PUD and site plan review. The DRC reviewed this project at 3 different occasions and moved the project forward subject to the technical comments which were made by the DRC. And then based upon the DRC's recommendations, staff determined that the applicant met all of the technical requirements to be moved for this project to be moved forward. Section 34-116 states that no construction may begin prior to review and approval from the DRC, the planning board, and the town council. The purpose of a PUD is to provide for a special exception to develop projects with provisions and standards that ensure compatibility among land uses, foster innovation in site planning and development, and encourage sound design practices. Now, I want to be able to draw your attention to the architecture of the buildings. The architecture shall be representative of the mid-20th century modern style. Such features include large glass panels, as you see here and here, that allow for outdoor light to enter via the rear and the front buildings. And secondly, the balconies will consist of a glass panel here with white railing, and then the garage, each garage door will consist of a white frame that you see here and frosted glass. As I said, the second and third floor shall consist of glass railings and a white handrails. The driveway and walkways will be paved with block, and the color will be a light gray texture. Now, continuing on with the site plan here, if I may, the Ocean One Lane, which is a private street here, well, it will be subject to access by the residents of the community. As I said over here, this is in the RM zoning district with a future land use designation of medium density residential consisting of two 11 two-family dwelling units. Ocean One Lane will be a private road subject for the use by the residents and their visitors. It is not a through road. It will end here, and access to US Highway 1 will not exist. Okay, regarding density, the RM1 allows for 8 dwelling units per acre, and according to PUD, it allows 10 dwelling units per acre. In this instance, the project is proposing 5.67 dwelling units per acre. Regarding the open space landscaping, there will be 39.2% of landscape open space on this particular site. The zoning code allows for a 20% total landscape open space, and according to PUD standards, it allows for 15%. As you can see, then the applicant more than meets that requirement. Next is the parking requirement, which is the code requires two parking spaces per dwelling unit. The applicant is proposing 92 parking spaces, 44 garage, of which 44 will be existing within the garage space in the enclosed garage, and then 44 additional spaces could be accessed through the driveway, with 4 guest spaces located at the far end here, if you can see my arrow, at the west end of the property. 2 spaces here to the north and 2 spaces to the south, for a total of 92 spaces.
Excuse me, can you go the visitors parking again? I'm sorry.
So, can you take off here?
I'm sorry. I apologize. You were going over on the east side and the west side, the visitors parking?
Yes, sir.
Can you go over that one more time?
I'll go over it again.
Thank you.
Regarding, there are 92 total parking spaces, okay? 44 of which will be garage spaces, inside the garage, and another 44 spaces will be in the driveway. So there's essentially room to have two cars in the garage, 2 cars in the driveway. And then there'll be 4 additional spaces, which will be guest spaces, which will be to the far left or the far west side of the property there. 2 spaces to the north, 2 guest spaces to the north, and 2 guest spaces to the south. You see that T there?
Kurt, what is the requirement?
Excuse me?
How many spaces are required?
The number of parking spaces are required of 2 parking spaces per dwelling unit. Okay? one other, is that clear for you, Mr. Hamilton?
Thank you.
Okay, good. Now, the next thing, the applicant is proposing a retaining wall along the north and south property lines. The town's engineer performed a preliminary review and found that there were no technical issues at this point. But I have to emphasize to you that staff will review these retaining walls again during the building permit process if this project gets approval by yourself and by the town council, which of course that's a big if. But I want to let you know that that retaining wall that's proposed for the north and south property lines will be subject to a building permit review at the time of submittal. Now,
Those are 4-foot walls, correct?
well, the applicant is proposing looks like about a 6-foot high wall.
Wouldn't that exceed our requirements?
Well, only if we're talking about the front. These along the north and south property line is considered the rear of those properties. So therefore, it's the 6-foot would be okay.
I guess I knew that. Thank you.
That's okay. Thank you for that, for asking that question, Mr. Chairman. At any point in time, you do not be shy, or when I finish the presentation, you have questions, you can ask, okay? Also, the applicant is here. I think Troy will raise up his hand. There he is. He'll be speaking after I will, and you can even ask questions after myself and Troy made presentation of both of us if you like, okay? Now, moving on, the intent of the review for the wall is to make sure that there's structural integrity for those retaining walls. The next thing is that the code requires a 10-foot minimum setback for the 2-family units. And if I may here this briefly show you, this hopefully the audience can see this. There's a 10-foot minimum along the rear property line, which is required by the code. But the applicant is going to provide a 40-foot setback from the rear wall of the building to the rear property line, and for one unit, and for the other unit here, it would be, 40 feet, and this one would be approximately 38 feet from the rear wall to the rear property line. The code requires 10, and they're going to provide 38 and 40-foot rear setbacks.
Is that the same for the homes on the north and the homes on the south?
That is correct. Yes, sir. Yes, Mr. Shea. Now, units A and B. Unit A is proposing a 3-bedroom, 3-bath project with 3,480 square feet of habitable area. Unit B will be a 4-bedroom, 4-bath with 3,978 square feet of habitable area. As I said earlier, this will be a 2-car garage with 2 additional spaces in the driveway of each. Unit A will have 2 stories, and Unit B will be a 3-story structure. Okay. Now, I'll get further into that in a minute. Building height for Unit A will be just over 32 feet, and the building height for Unit B will be 38.43, just under 38.5 feet. There will be a 0 lot line on one side of the buildings here, and then on the non-zero side here and here, there will be a minimum of a 10-yard side setback. Okay.
I think you said 10 yard, you meant 10
I'm sorry,
foot.
10 feet, 10 yards. I'm thinking football terms, sorry. 10-foot setback. The lots will range in size from 5,420 to 5,588 square feet per unit. The code, the RM1 talks about a minimum lot size of 10,000 square feet with a 75-foot wide lot width. This entire lot averages about 85 feet in width, with a total lot area of averaging about 10,855 square feet. So as you can see, this project will meet those requirements. Now, the 3rd floor option here. let's talk about this a little bit. There will be no windows that will be exposed for these. First of all, there are two third floor options, okay? There will be no windows exposed looking out to the rear of the property toward, the Old Town Lane community or to the Juno Dunes community. So I want to make sure that's really clear. There will be no windows at this end of the property here on the third floor, okay? All the windows will be directed out toward the opposite end where the decks are. So let's talk about those two options. As you can see here by the schematic, the third floor option 1 offers a living space of 552 square feet with an open deck of 593 square feet, which is here to my left and should be to your left as well, hopefully, and to the left of the audience. The second third floor option is a living space of 941 square feet with an open deck of 222 square feet, which is this option here, and the deck, the 222 is this area here. It's not shaded, but as you can see, it's a much smaller area. The living area is increased by over 390 some square feet. Okay. Now, again, to repeat about no windows here or over here affecting the residential communities. The PUD process. The zoning code mentions a maximum lot coverage of 35%. The PUD process allows for 25% modification. In this instance, the applicant is proposing 43.75% lot coverage. So that 8.75% increase is exactly a 25% increase. The building height. This is also an important point I want to emphasize. The code talks about here, when you look at PUD flexibility, that the maximum height may be increased by 1 story provided the additional floor is occupied by dwelling units. And as you can remember here, that extra third floor is being occupied by dwelling unit. Therefore, they can go the additional story, which in most building codes, a story is about 10 feet inside from floor to ceiling. Now, in looking at the very first paragraph here, after determining that the requirements of the PUD division have been met, the board shall recommend approval with modification, or disapproval. The board may recommend the establishment of a planned unit development, provided it determines that all 8 PUD standards have been met, as noted on page 3 of the memorandum. There are 8 standards there, and staff and our review and analysis has determined that it appears that we didn't see any objections or any of those 8 standards where the applicant did not meet those. They appear to have met them. So staff has talked about the flexibility, and staff has talked about the applicant's request and the increase for the height and the lot coverage. So with that, the staff now turns it over to you board members and asks that we recommend that the Planning and Zoning Board consider the site plan for the Ocean One project, subject to the conditions outlined on pages 5, 6, and 7 of the memorandum. I said again, Troy's here, Ms. Holloway's here to also make his presentation, and I'm going to encourage him to come on up and make his presentation. Then after that, as I said, if you have questions, either one of us will both make ourselves available.
I have one question.
Yes,
I would
sir.
ask of you. It shows an optional pool.
Yes, sir.
And if we approve this, are we also approving the optional pool, or will that be a separate permitting process?
That's a separate permitting process. Okay, we have allowed, well, let me take that word back, allow. They provided swim pools meet, side setbacks and screening and fencing requirements, just like any other PUD or any other major development that's come through the town of General Beach.
So we approve, we are not approving the pool.
Well, it's optional, so the answer I would think would be yes. You are, but it's optional in that they still have to meet the requirements. It's just like the retaining wall, okay, where you're approving it with the retaining wall, but it's still got to go through a building permit process and a review process. So staff may go through a technical review, find out the retaining wall or the pool may not work for that particular lot or property, and then they may not be able to get it approved. But you're looking at the site plan as it presented.
As I look at it, now I may be mistaken, but I don't think there's enough room there to erect a lanai covering that pool and that lot size.
Well, that's something that we would look at on a permit, on a lot by lot basis, on a case by case basis.
Kurt, I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
In the April 17th memo, item, under survey, item 10, it says the lot lines and easements created by the plat of Seminole Ridge as recorded in plat book, whatever, are not being shown at the request of the Director of Planning and Zoning. Is there a reason why that item isn't being shown? Because is it old or is there another reason?
Yes, if you actually go to the property appraisal website right now and you look for that parcel, you'll actually see the plat for what Seminole Ridge used to be. So you'll see the 31 homes. So that comment actually says that, per my request, I did not want to confuse anybody and actually show an older project. So it was my request for them to give us a new survey
I see.
without those lines. That's what that meant.
All right.
And to address your comment, Mike, actually the plans, one of the plans from the applicant actually indicates that they cannot go past 43.75 lot coverage. That's indicated on the plans because screen enclosure counts towards lot coverage. So any of the homes that are close to that percentage will not be able to have the pool screen closure, which is very similar to what we had with the preserves at Juno Beach. So staff made sure that the applicant was aware of that and, that they included that on the plans themselves.
Thank you for that, Frank.
No problem.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I misunderstood when you said screen enclosure. No, that it would exceed the lot coverage requirement.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
That's the right one. That's yours. Oh, it's wrong. Is that the right one? Yes. We're good. Okay, good evening. My name is Troy Holloway. I'm with Gentile Glass Holloway Homani and Associates. We're here on behalf of our client, FDC Juno Beach LLC. I guess I should have coordinated better with Kurt because our presentations cover a lot of the same materials, so I apologize. I guess maybe it'll sink in better when I go through it the second time. As Kurt did say, we are requesting an approval of an infill project, an infill planned unit development that does feature 11 two-family luxury residential buildings for a total of 22 total units on 3.88 acres. This is the site, as you all are very familiar with. It is currently a vacant site, does have a lot of grade change going up from Ocean Drive. It is situated between US Highway 1 to the west, Ocean Drive to the east, or A1A. To the north, it's buffered by Old Town, which is a 3-story single-family project. To the south by Juno Dunes, which is a 3-story townhouse project. And then to the east is your Kagan Park, and then to the west is the environmentally sensitive natural area. Just a brief site history. The subject property is part of the old Seminole Ridge plat. It did once have a single-family home on this property that was removed back in 2007. And it did have a previous approval granted on this property for the 31 townhomes, which was the 8 dwelling units per acre. This is kind of the surrounding land use and zoning of the property. First of all, I guess to the east, you have Kagan Park, which has a zoning and land use of public recreation. To the west, we have the environmental sensitive lands, has a future land use of conservation. Just to the north and the south are kind of the important ones. North, here we have the Old Town, which has a zoning of RS1 residential single family. It has a future land use of residential low density. And then to the south, we have the Juno Dunes Townhomes, which has a zoning of RH residential multiple family high density and a land use of high density. So we kind of fall right in between those two. We're sandwiched between the two properties and also then kind of have a mid-range zoning and land use. Our zoning is RM residential multifamily medium density, and we have a residential medium density land use. So we're sandwiched between the two. It's a great transitional land use between those two, from high to low, from the south to the north. So it works very well for those two existing land, for those both developments. This is the site plan. As you can see, there are 22 units, what we show there. There's 11 buildings. So these are 11 2- and 3-story family villas for a total of the 22 luxury residential units. This is the one point of ingress and egress for the development here onto A1A. It does come down to US 1, and we have a hammerhead turnaround, which is designed and approved by Palm Beach County for fire turnarounds. At the end of the street, we have a 8-foot decorative fountain wall in this location. Along US 1, we will have about an 8-foot retaining wall. It'll be a two-tiered retaining wall. So we'll have 4-foot levels. We'll have 2 4-foot retaining walls that'll be stepped and landscaped in front of both of those walls. Again, the grades on this site, they do vary from about elevation 18 here on A1A, and go up to almost elevation 40, about 1/3 of the way back to US 1. So the biggest challenge on this property has been the grades. We do have our engineer here tonight, Jonathan Ricketts, who's done a great job of getting a grasp on these grades and doing a nice job of balancing this project and getting it to work. It's been a challenge, also we are cutting some of the grade from the highest point here in the middle and taking it to the west to raise the property back up a little bit. But the grades had to be set with the existing Old Town to the north and Juno Dunes to the south to get our finished floors to be comparable to theirs, so we're not towering above them or sunk way below them as well. We do have a 6-foot privacy wall proposed for both the north boundary and the south boundary. That will be continuous, a 6-foot privacy wall. And we also have proposed a heavy buffer entry landscaping along A1A fronting the project as well. The entire roadway will be a brick paver road. All the driveways will be brick pavered. The sidewalk, the common sidewalk, and all the sidewalks for the units will also be brick pavered. This is a blow up just to kind of give you a little detail of the ingress or entry onto A1A. I think you had there was an email in your packet, but you probably didn't have all the information on this. Our separation currently between our proposed road and Celestial Way is 77.3 feet. We have been approved by Palm Beach County Traffic Division for exactly that 77.3 feet plus or minus, which was approved back in November. I think you have a email correspondence in your package stating that, but you didn't have the exhibit. And this was the exhibit that was sent to Palm Beach County that they approved, which was Exhibit E 1.1, which again showed that 77.3 foot separation from our center line of our proposed road to the center line of Celestial Way. This is a blow up, just a little detail of the typical 2-family villa. As you can see, each of those lots have a minimum depth of 124.5 feet and a minimum width of 42.5 feet width. We have a 10-foot setback from each of the units to their side property line. And again, these units are 2-story with an optional 3rd story. So we have a 2-story shown on the right. The 3rd story shown, this is, I guess, with multiple options for the 3rd story. You can have it with deck, all deck. You can have it partial, like this one is, which is partially enclosed 3-story, and then a partially enclosed 3rd-story balcony. We also, again, as I said, we have all brick pavered driveways and sidewalks. We proposed a plank paver, which is a really nice, it's kind of the new style paver, which has a plank looking longer. I think they're about 2 feet, 18 inches to 2 feet long. So that gives you a nice feel. Along the sides, we proposed a black aluminum picket fence, which would go between the units, between each of the buildings. And then the 6-foot privacy wall, which would be on the property line to the rear, and then also the common 0 lot line property separating the interior lots. And in the back, we're just kind of showing here some examples of what they could do in the backyards. Again, they're optional. It would be up to the home buyer. They could do a pool and a spa, or they could do a little courtyard garden with a little spa, or just a little fountain in the back. So there's a lot of different options they could do. As Kurt did say, doing screen enclosures on these lots probably will not be possible because with the building, just the building itself, we pretty much have maxed out the building lot coverage that is allowable. Just some site data numbers. Again, the total area is 3.88 acres. The minimum lot size, and this is basically to combine the 2 lot for the 1 building. The minimum lot size here is 10,855 square feet, whereas 7,500 square feet is the minimum allowable. So we greatly exceed that. The proposed density here, we have 22 units proposed, which is only 5.67 dwelling units per acre. The allowable density under PUD is the 39 units, which is the 10 units per acre. Our building lot coverage for the overall site is 30.8%, but again, 43.75% is the maximum allowable per lot. Our open space provided for the overall site is 47.2%. For the PUD, 15% is the minimum allowable per lot. Our maximum building height is 38.43 feet. 3 stories, not to exceed 40 feet is what is allowable. So we are under the maximum allowable. Our parking required is 47 spaces, which is 2 spaces per unit. I'm pretty sure, Kurt, we also have to have 3 guest spaces per code. So it's 47 required. And we do provide 92, which is the 2 in the garage, 2 in the driveway. And then we have those 4 additional guest spots, which are at the hammerhead. This is the same elevations that Kurt had showed you. This is our front elevation. He covered a lot of these points in his presentation as well. Again, these are all 2- and 3-story, 2-family luxury residences. On the right-hand side is the 2-story kind of example, and the left side would be the 3-story example. You can see the balcony in the front, and then the 3rd story enclosed behind that balcony. They do have a mid-20th century modern architectural style. They have a very large, expansive glass panels, front and back. They have the nice clear glass balcony railings, rooftop deck on the 3rd story option, frosted glass garage doors, which I think is really neat. And the facades of these structures are to be a stucco finish with a porcelain, stone, and/or tile accents on these units as well. And in the rear facing elevation, again, you can see some really nice, clean, modern geometrical lines with this architecture. Very large covered patios. They have proposed concrete tile roofs, large sliding glass doors all around, and then balconies front and back on these units. So just some of the project conclusions. This is a modest infill project that adds luxury residential housing to a very strong housing market, and it will greatly enhance the overall area. It is compatible with the abutting 3-story single-family homes to the north and the 3-story townhomes to the south. As I said, it's a great transitional development for those 2 communities. It promotes the overall benefits, focusing around smart growth ideas, the environment, and the economy. This project will add approximately 2.7% to your annual budget, or about $81,000. The site plan is consistent with the town's comprehensive plan and meets all PUD standards in the zoning code, requiring no waivers or variances. And lastly, we agree with all conditions of approval as listed in the staff report. Thank you.
Don't go away, there'll be a lot of
Okay, sure.
questions. You want to start at your end, or
Do you have any comments?
I have questions?
I'd like to hear from Frank. Frank, do you have any observations for the count for us?
Please be sure to speak into the microphone.
Excuse me?
Please be sure to speak into the microphone.
Frank, Kurt, do you have any observations for us that we should be concerned about from your
Actually-
professional?
Excuse me, right before we go into that, we should actually do public hearing. And then we can do questions.
Yeah.
We have people on Zoom that actually want to say something.
I was going to take them next, but
Oh,
because,
to you.
normally, after the applicant presentation, we ask questions of the applicant, and I would like the public to be able to hear those questions and answers before we hear from them. It helps us.
Whatever the board decides. Yes. I'm sorry, Mr. Hamilton, what was the question?
No, I was saying, I do have some comments, but I'd like to yet have either you or Kurt, do you have some observations about the project that we should be, from your perspective, that we should be made aware of?
Yes, of course, I can give you my opinion and feedback on it. When we first actually heard from Mr. Tommy Frankel and the representatives of 2GHO, they actually came to the town to discuss a single-family project, which all of you, I'm sure you're aware, we put it in the activity report. We were very happy about it because that property has been vacant for a long time, since 2007, but even before that, that structure that was there was not occupied. So the fact that somebody was moving forward, the staff was actually very happy about that. After that, it transcended to what you have here, which is a two-family project. As Mr. Troy Holloway mentioned, this project is sandwiched in between a single family and a high-density project, which is actually something that the town is looking forward to do. If you look at our zoning map, you'll see Sunrise, you'll see Sunset Way, Seaside, all of those are single-family zoning districts. Then you get into Old Town, also a single-family district, but now a planned unit development. So the intensity of the project begins to rise up. Then we have this, two-family project, RM1 zoning district. That's how it was approved, back in the 2000s. They're not asking for it to get changed. And then to the south, you have a high-density project. So the project itself does fit very well in that location. It's right in the middle from what you have, single-family to high-density townhouses. Kurt mentioned there's 48 units to the south, 8 units to the north. So a 22-unit project for close to a 4-acre parcel is actually a very good number for staff. Per the PUD flexibility, they could have gone to 10 dwelling units per acre. They're asking close to half of that, which is a 5.68, I believe, 5.67. So again, they're not asking for anything above that. The architectural standards do meet the town's old Florida look, which is the modern, which was recently approved, I want to say 3-4 years ago into the town. They meet that standard. It's a project that we don't have in Juno Beach. We do have a duplex, that's been approved in the RMT zoning district, and then we have a duplex zoning district in Coconut Avenue, but nothing that looks like this, and then that's why we refer to it as a two-family project. It is very, it switches from 2 stories to 3 stories. That's something that we don't have in Juno Beach. So the innovative part of the PUD requirement, I believe it meets that criteria. Staff went through this at 3 different locations with the DRC members, and that includes, fire, police, Jupiter Water, Loxahatchee River District, the town engineer, building official, public works director, so pretty much all of your staff. We went through it 3 different times. There were always things that we wanted to tweak, more lighting here. Why is there a sidewalk on the north side but not on the south side? Things like that. And we believe that the product that you have here in front of you, it's something that meets all technical standards for Juno Beach. The 2 things that they're asking for the PUD flexibility being the additional story and the 25% increase in lot coverage is not anything new that we don't have in Juno Beach, especially if we look to the properties to the north. I don't know. Do you want to add something else?
It adds in terms of transition, what we call in planning a transitional area where you have a single family community in Old Town. And this project is proposing to be a 2-family development. And then just to the south of that, you have Juno Dunes, which is high density residential. So usually in planning and zoning concept, you have a transition area where you start with single family, then you go to 2-family or 3-family, till you get to multifamily, and then ultimately commercial and industrial. So that's what I mean by transitional. And this area with this project will perform that function of a transitional development, which it also is an infill project, whereas we have vacant property. And well, if I may say, I'm not a property appraiser, but I understand plenty enough to know that this adds to the value of the property versus a vacant, almost 4-acre site that's vacant and sitting vacant since at least 2007. Whereas now we have a possible project that could bring in additional tax funds and so forth. So the transitional aspect and the idea of this is an infill project, the staff thought this was a project that we needed to bring before you and ultimately to the town council. It's a PUD project, but in my 30 years or so of planning, this is pretty much, if there's any such thing, and there's no, as a straightforward PUD project, this comes about as close as it can be in terms of straightforward, in terms of all the technical aspects, infrastructure. You have the utility easement along the front of each property, about 10-foot wide. You have a 45-foot wide right-of-way in Ocean 1 lane, and therefore they can have a 20-foot setback from the front property line because we have a 45-foot wide right-of-way, just like in the project on Venus, where that was in front of a 45-foot wide right-of-way. So this is a 2-family, a 22-unit 2-family project that we've gone through pretty carefully, and we're still going to go through it carefully. If you decide to approve it, we recommend that you consider the conditions of approval.
Did you have any concerns about the egress from the property and the location of Celestial Way on the north side?
No, sir, we don't have any, and Frank can also jump in on this. We don't seem to have any problem with egress. As Mr. Holloway has indicated, it went through Palm Beach County submittal in terms of the egress, and it was actually, well, the existing driveway that's there is going to be moved, so it can be more centered on this property and allow for Celestial, Ocean, and right turns and left turns to take place without any conflict.
So the approval has been given by the county as to the location of that road.
Yes, sir.
And that's based on
Well, that was also
traffic volume and things of that sort.
right. It met all of the traffic performance standards. Besides, this in the exemption area. There is an area called the technical term is that when you have development that is east of 95, which is what this is, it falls into the traffic performance exemption area.
Coastal zone, I think it's called.
I'm sorry,
Coastal zone?
coastal zone. Yes, sir. Thank you. That's the coastal zoning impact area is what it's called.
Jim?
Mr. Thompson, thank you for your presentation. All your details and visuals were very helpful, as were Mr. Holloway's.
Yes, sir, Ms. Ferguson.
Question, though, about the third story. My understanding is that because we're in a 30-foot maximum elevation limit, and the applicant is asking to go higher, I was under the impression that there was a restriction as to how many square feet your third story could be, and I just wondered if you could clarify that a little bit for us.
Well, I'll let the director, he can answer that.
Yes, what you're referencing to is actually a tower structure. So a tower structure has a 225 square foot max. This is not a tower structure. This is technically a third story. So as you see on Old Town Lane, that's a third story. If you look at their third stories, it can actually encompass the entirety of the footprint of the house. Same thing with Juno Dunes. So not a tower structure, a straightforward third story, but they decided to actually not occupy the entire footprint. As you can see in the image in front of you, they actually decided to put the third story to the front of the building. And in some cases, it's a little bit over 1,000 square feet for both options.
Thank you.
No problem.
I have some questions. Should I go last or next? Or
You can go next.
Doesn't matter. So I have some questions for Mr. Holloway. And I'd like to thank you and Mr. Frankel for meeting with me. I did accept their invitation to a Zoom meeting, so that was super informative. We spent about 30 minutes just
You're very welcome.
going over some things, so that really helped a lot. One of my questions is regarding the justification figure that you said 81,000 or 2.7% increase to the town's fiscal year budget. How is that? What are we getting?
That was based on the ad valorem tax, and I didn't have what the current taxes are, but that's an increase of I think, I'm assuming that's an increase of what they're paying
Okay.
today to what they're going
So
to pay.
I did a calculation on that and I came up with each unit is about 1.8 million.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's actually, you're very good at math. That's actually what they told me the selling price was going to be, so.
That would be, it can't be that because one's 2-story, one's 3-story. So I assume one would be maybe a little less and one a little bit more.
That's exactly right. I think he's estimating 1.75 to around 2 million, so.
Okay, and the other question is all about the environmental part of it. I see under the justification, it says it'll promote the overall benefits to smart growth and the environment. So I did look at the drawings or the landscape layout, and in terms of native plants, I would like to see more added. I see there's 50% required, and then with like native trees and native shrubs, we have 50.3%, which works out to 0.5 of a plant. And then the native shrubs is 50.4%, which works out to 9 extra native plants. So that's not a whole lot, and that would be something important to me that I would ask council to also consider, would be adding native plants, more of a quantity to meet the requirement, not just a decimal amount, but something significant. And there's really great native options that do well here.
Yes, there are. Probably what throws that off a lot is
Yeah.
the podocarpus interior, kind of a screen hedge that we've proposed in the backyards. Unfortunately, it's tough, other than clusia, it's tough to find something that's going to grow.
A hedge,
What's that?
a hedge.
Yeah, very
or-
thick hedge, 8 feet tall.
I can make recommendations. I've studied a lot of them.
Yeah, clusia does great, but it gets very wide.
There's Simpson stopper and there's different types of myrtle.
Yeah,
and things
Simpson
like
stopper
that.
does okay, extremely slow growing.
You
Take a
need
long,
something
long
quick.
time.
Okay. Get a taller fence.
But yeah, that would
All
definitely
right, that would be an important consideration, considering that is part of our comprehensive plan. And we can talk about this in the next thing, but objective 4 policy 4.2 says require priority use of native vegetation. So I'd like to see more of a priority percentage represented.
Okay.
But otherwise it looks nice. And
Yeah.
Just a quick question for Mr. Holloway. I was very pleased to read in your environmental report that you're going to be removing a number of invasive species, which are there, Australian pines and Brazilian peppers, which are pretty widespread up the hill there and create a pest for everyone else who gets Brazilian peppers popping up all over their property. So that's a good step forward. You also mentioned, or the report also mentioned, that on the west side of the property, there were some fine trees such as live oak. And I wonder whether it would be possible to salvage any of those?
If any of them are salvageable, we will definitely try. It's very, that's those very sandy soils. It's kind of tough sometimes. I mean, it's almost sugar sand up there. So we have them. It's pretty dense in some of those areas. So it's been tough to really look at, see how those canopies are. But if they're a nice tree, we'll definitely make an effort to save and relocate those.
Okay, another question for you. The maximum elevation right now of that property is 38 feet, if I'm correct in reading the contour map, and it's going to drop down by about 10 feet. And I see that you're going to take a lot of that soil, or whatever we wish to call it, from the mound and apparently shift it to the west side to make more of a plateau up there. Will there be a net increase or a net decrease in the total amount of soil on the hill?
Will that be balanced, Jonathan? Our engineer will have to answer that.
Okay, thanks.
Hi, good evening. My name is Jonathan Ricketts, and I am a registered engineer in the state of Florida. The answer to your question, yes, the site will be balanced. But there will be just a little bit of extra. So, but for the most part, the site balances.
Extra in the sense of extra that will be brought in?
No, sir. We would have extra fill after the site is leveled. So we will balance our site around our average elevation and still have a little bit of dirt left.
Thank you.
I'm good. Okay, in no particular order, I have a few questions. Would you have a rendering showing what the project would look like from US 1? The description sounded great with the two balls and the vegetation, but
I've got a plan. There's a section of that wall in your plans. I think it's on SP2. There's a section of that stepped wall with the hedge. I think actually
yes, but it was like
I think we actually have an elevation
didn't-
looking at that too.
Right, it wasn't an
Is there
elevation.
a way to pull that up? I don't know. Let me grab my plan.
And Frank, while you're standing there, you mentioned there would be no glass in the back of the building, but the rendering he showed windows.
No, on the third story.
One window.
On the third story.
Got it.
Right, yes.
The rendering did show a small window, I guess.
Not from the bedroom, then more than likely that's coming from the stairs.
Okay.
If you look at this over here. Yes. That's a window. And then that's a window right there because it is a bedroom, but the back part of it.
Nothing.
Right, correct. There is no windows right here.
Thought I did see one.
The abutting properties would be looking this way. I mean, they're placed on that side.
But yeah, on sheet SP2, we have there is a tiered retaining wall section, and then there's also then an elevation looking at that wall from US 1. So from the section, you'll see there's basically you've got the existing sidewalk in US 1, then we'll have a hedge, then behind that we'll have a 4-foot wall, and then a hedge, another 4-foot wall. And
I
at the very
saw that,
top-
but it didn't show a rendering like we saw.
Oh, a
in
nice
front.
rendering? No, we did not do a nice rendering, sorry.
That was just a question. I notice your environmental assessment is from 2005. And why was that? Why? That's 15 years
I
ago.
think there was an updated letter in for that we submitted as, I can dig that up too if you want to. I think there was an updated letter from the environmental. I know they went out and looked just recently for eagles. I guess there was an eagle. Actually, the owner saw an eagle flying around Seminole, so he actually had the environmental guy come out and make sure.
But otherwise, there's been no changes.
There's been no changes, no, nothing.
There was something on a tortoise report there too.
Yes, no tortoises, no eagles. Which
Regarding the tortoise report, I noticed that expired May 1st, so I guess EW Consulting will
yeah,
require a second
they'll
one.
update that.
Yeah.
Apparently, there were no tracks found.
No, no tracks, no burrows.
And again, I looked at the drawings you had for drainage, and I admit that it wasn't that clear to me. But, I'm just looking at the grade and the paved road and wonder in a strong cloudburst, could we see water flooding across A1A and, possibly into the lake or into the park, which is directly across?
Yeah, well, the site does have some unusually high drainage characteristics for infiltration, and the methods prescribed by the South Florida Water Management District, as well as the town code, show that even up almost through the 100-year storm, there will be no discharge from the site. It literally has that high of a capacity. It would be one of the things that we probably won't see on any other sites that we work on.
Which means that in a sustained cloudburst or extended rain, when I drive on A1A, I won't be having water coming across the
That's
road.
correct.
As we see in place. Okay, thank you.
One more thing in that direction. I saw mention of exfiltration. Could you explain that and how that has a bearing on the water drainage? Exfiltration,
Yes, the exfiltration system was used. That does twofolds. Obviously, it provides storage
okay.
for when we have those high-intensity rainfall events, and it also returns the water directly to the site upon which it fell. So it would keep the runoff within the Ocean One property.
So it's underground, it's a catchment?
That's correct.
Or like a dry well kind of?
That
thing?
is correct. So it will take that high-intensity rainfall,
Okay.
gather it in that system. It will temporarily store it over a few minutes and then allow it to exfiltrate into the groundwater.
And is it directional when it exfiltrates, or is it just like percolating out, or is it directed toward one?
Well, the site will be somewhat level in the finished state, and so it will be equally distributed because the site is roughly level, and the exfiltration trench will be level from the east end to the west.
Okay, so it goes east to west. All right, thank you.
I have a couple.
Following along, is this going to be an HOA community?
Yes, there'll be an HOA.
Chapter 720?
I'm not sure if is it chapter 720, Jenna?
Well,
If
if
it
it's
will
an
be
HOA, yeah, I guess.
It will have an HOA for sure, though, yes.
Okay. And finally, since it's a private community, is it restricted access? Or if I were walking my dog along, could I walk up there and around or look? Or is it going to be no trespassing? Or
It
what do you-
is a public right-of-way, so it's not,
Okay.
it's not gated, so it's not,
All right,
yeah.
that answers that. And thank you.
Sure.
Number one, thank you for your presentation. Thought it was very tastefully done. A couple of questions surrounding life safety issues. The main road, as I read it here, correct me if I'm wrong, is 20 feet wide.
The pavement
The
section
paved
plus
road
the
is
curb
20
and
feet
gutter.
wide.
Yes.
And my question is, and I guess it's up to the HOA, whether or not they're going to allow parking on the main road.
Correct. I think we had talked to, when we were talking to Dee Dee about that, as far as if somebody has a party or something, like we were just in Old Town, matter of fact, meeting with the neighbors there, and people do park on the street temporarily.
Yeah. And being a person that is very concerned with life safety, if you had cars parked from the north side or the right side on a 20-foot wide road, you would have a life safety issue.
Sure. Yeah, I'm sure it's not something they're going to want to let people do every day, but if they have guests, I'm imagining just like Old Town does, then people park there and just a very temporary basis.
And I'm trying to make an observation, okay? And as you're an engineer?
Landscape architect.
Excuse me?
Landscape architect.
Okay. We are going to have more and more people working from home. Just a fact of life. And I'm concerned about, in the environment that we are living in today, and it's probably going to continue this way, my best estimate, that we're going to have more people not only parking in their driveway, but having people parking on the street unless the HOA says you can't park on the street. And with a road that's only, as I see here, 20 feet wide, that's a life safety issue, getting fire engines up and down that road.
Yeah, I'm sure the residents aren't going to want that because you have cars backing out of driveways both sides. I mean, it's going to create an issue getting out of your driveway as well, so.
So I leave that as a concern for Frank and Kurt to look at, okay, as a note. And I live on a street on Celestial Way that is a narrow street, but we only have townhouses on one side of the road. And the police chief and the fire department are always concerned about not being able to get a fire truck down the road to service the community.
Sure.
So I leave that as a statement or an observation.
Yes, Mr. Hamilton, we did submit the plans and asked for comments from the Palm Beach County Fire Department, and they issued no comment at this point in time. So when the plans, if this is approved and goes to permit, we're going to ask for the fire department to look very carefully at this, but at the time of the DRC, they didn't have any comment.
I'm just making an observation as a layman. Okay?
I'm making
It's
a note of
It's
that.
a 20-foot wide road, and if you're going to have cars parked there, you're not going to get a vehicle down there. That's all.
Right, I understand. I'm making a note of that.
Okay. And as another layman observation, and I've sat there with my vehicle on the road, as you pull out of the driveway here, as you're aware, there's 77 feet to Celestial Way, but the line of sight looking north on highway, if you're looking north, if you put the road up here, okay? We have people that unfortunately don't follow the 35-mile-an-hour speed limit going north and south. But right here, the line of sight, you can't see vehicles coming from the north to the south. It's very limited. And I would just like to say, from a layman's perspective, because traffic engineers have to approve the drawings, I think you have to be very concerned about vehicles coming up north, and where a car has to come out of that driveway and to make a right-hand turn where cars unfortunately don't pay attention to the speed limit. And I think that should be a concern to the community.
Sure. We do show that the required 30 by 30 foot site triangle, but we'll go ahead and also show the FDOT sight lines that are for that speed limit as well.
Because the vehicles, you have vehicles coming from the south coming downhill, and vehicles coming from the north going uphill. And then you got Celestial Way making north and south turns. And so it's a pretty busy intersection as it is. And I'm just wondering, is there a way to be more proactive from a safety perspective, and which I've seen in many other communities where there's a blind driveway. And again, I don't know if you want to call it a blind driveway, but it's pretty limited when you're coming from the south, from the north to the south, not being able to see that driveway. I don't know if anybody else on the planning and zoning has a comment about that, but I just want to, I've sat there and watched the traffic go through there.
So from the existing driveway now to this drawing, is this driveway more to the south or to the north of that sort of existing?
Much to the south.
It's to the south. Okay. By how far? Like off of?
Current driveway is almost across from Celestial Way.
Okay,
Yeah, it's probably 35 feet, maybe south.
okay, thanks.
And to answer Mr. Hamilton's questions, there is a 25-foot safe corner, but we also have a line of sight distance of approximately 300 feet. that will require all of the landscaping within 300 feet of either side of the intersection to have an open sight window. So there will be a limitation on the height of the shrubs, and there will be a minimum height for the stories of the tree or the undersides of the trees.
You're the expert.
And that has been, that's been reviewed by the county as well.
I just know I
for
backed my
connecting.
car up there and pulled
Yes,
out
sir.
and looked to the left, okay? And you can't see anything coming.
The road grades will change slightly on our side, but the way we will set up that landscaping will be in full compliance with Palm Beach County, Florida Department of Highway Transportation, and then also the National Safety Council.
The other the observation I have is there, do you think it's, and again, I think this project is wonderful, okay? Do you think there's any benefit on the west side of the project to have a emergency access to the project so that vehicles could get in on the west side of the property in case of emergency?
To US 1?
Yes.
I know the town of Juno Beach did not want access coming from US 1. I mean, we do have the T turnaround, and the fire department has reviewed this, and they're okay with this, especially with the number of units. There's only 22 units. It's not a high density project. Also, the grades would make it very difficult to accomplish that as well. So
What is the reason that the town did not want access?
We provided comment, and the reason why is because we have Marsway and we have Olympus, and we have issues with both of those streets as through streets in Juno Beach. As you're aware, we're doing a traffic study on Marsway right now. So, and in addition, oh, sorry, I can't move that one. You have Olympus right to the north that already gives you access to US 1. Having a dead end or the T at the end, it's for life safety issues. Palm Beach County reviewed it. They're okay with it. They can actually go in, come back. You have 3 ways to access the community: Ocean Drive South, North, and Olympus as well. Thank you.
As far as Old Town and the community to the north, what is the width of the road there? I mean, Bob was saying that this development would have a
It's the
20-foot.
same. It's about 20 feet, Ms. Halpern.
And
And there are curves as well. And I was on that street just earlier this afternoon. There's enough for one lane in east-west direction.
And to Bob's point, have there been any complaints from either the fire department or police or residents that in the other neighborhoods that they can't get?
I haven't
around,
heard
get through?
any.
I've been here since 2012. I maybe got one complaint about somebody parking too close to the other person's driveway,
Yeah,
but not because they couldn't get through.
okay.
That was
Thank
the
you.
only complaint that I can remember that came to my staff or
Okay.
myself.
Thanks.
Just to add to real quick, as Frank had said about the study that's being done on Marsway and Olympus, one of the reasons why that traffic study was done by Marsway, I think the residents asked about that. And, we want to cut the speedway concept because there's a tendency for folks to speed up and down, particularly on Marsway. We had clocked someone in their 40s mile per hour range. So we definitely don't want that kind of thing to be going on here if it's a through street all the way to US 1. It'd be too much of a temptation.
And there's just one last thing. When I met with Mr. Holloway and Mr. Frankel, I asked them what would happen if ultimately P&Z and the council didn't approve the increase in maximum building height from 30 to 40 feet, and if we didn't increase the maximum lot coverage from 35% to the 43.75. And Mr. Frankel did express that if those items aren't fully approved, then the project really becomes not feasible financially. So I think as we consider whether or not to move this forward, we have to realize what an impact our decision makes one way or another. Thanks. Mhm.
Okay, we'll open it up for public comment. Before we begin, we have a rule. We ask you to hold your comments to 3 minutes. And we don't allow ceding of time from one person to another person. We want to hear from all people who have an interest in providing input to this board. Do you have the timing device, or we don't have that set up?
I have a,
You-
yes, I do.
Okay. Who was the first?
I had a comment submitted from Emmanuel and Elaine Kotronakis, which I'm trying to get up right here. They wish for me to read it into the record. Good morning. We will be meeting representatives of the new development this afternoon, but wanted to let you know of our concerns before tonight's planning and zoning meeting. As a Juno Beach resident in Old Town Lane, I have some concerns about the project. My main issue is the proximity and elevation of the structures. Permitting 3-story structures at that elevation would tower over our community and impact our privacy. Old Town Lane was carefully designed to maximize privacy in closed quarters. None of our structures have viability or transparent windows on the west elevation. This was done to provide privacy in our homes, in our pools, and in our yards. The proposed project would permit direct views from a high vantage point into our lives. I ask that the grade for the proposed site be lowered, the height restriction be maintained at 2-story/30 feet, and a privacy screen/landscape buffer be required. The developer has graciously sat down to discuss these issues with us and our neighbors, and their willingness to address our needs is appreciated. None of the proposed remedies have been included in the plan submitted to this board for approval. I ask that the remedy for our concerns be included in this board's deliberations and that approval of this project not be granted unless our concerns are addressed. They look forward to seeing us tonight. I have them on Zoom. Mr. Kotronakis, did you have anything else to add?
I want to say that I was very happy that the builder met with us and our neighbors. They were very engaging and were willing to make us happy and do what they can to address our concerns. Now that's all well and good, but I don't know what all the options are to protect our privacy. And I trust this board, the city staff, and the city council to advocate on our behalf to see what we could do to minimize the intrusion on our privacy. Now, we like the project. We really like the project. So this is not, we'd like to see this go forward, but we'd like to make sure that the city protects our way of life, in our neighborhood. And it was nice that we talked about the transition from single family low density to the high density. So I just like this board to give some consideration about some options that could enhance our privacy. The builder said that it's not going to be a problem. We're going to have a 6-foot fence. I have some concerns, and I'll trust again this board, the city staff, and city council to use their expertise to see if there's anything we could do to enhance the privacy, whether it be lowering the grade of the sites or limiting continuing the transition by having the 2 families. I mean, the 2-story buildings on the north side of the project and the 3-story on the south side to continue that transition from low density to high density, or what other options the experts could come up to protect our property. But again, very nice meeting with the builder. We like the project. We're just asking for the city's help to come up with ways to protect some of our privacy in our yards and.
Thank you. I think we understand what you're saying. And I would ask the applicant if he would like to make a comment.
Yes, we did meet with the homeowners there. We met with them, I think about a month or so ago. We just met with them tonight. And we did go over, just so you all know, again, as Jonathan stated, our proposed grades are very even to what their grades are. In some cases, their finished floor is exactly the same as our finished floor. Some places we're 12 inches, maybe less. Sometimes it's 12 inches more. So essentially they're the same. Also, again, they are 3-story homes at Old Town. Their rear setbacks, I think they have minimums of 10 feet in the rear where we're 35 plus. So we're greatly increased in the back setback. So, and also their building lot coverage is exactly the same as ours. So it's the same, and there's 0 lot line single family. They're not just.
You also don't have any windows on that.
On the third
Third
floor, yes.
floor.
Yeah, the third floor is basically buried into that roof. When you look at the third floor elevation, you can barely tell it's a third floor because it's set into the roof line. So we've really tried everything we can to reduce the impacts absolutely 100% to all the neighbors. So not just to the north, but to the south as well. So
So what remedies did you propose to?
well, the biggest issues we talked about today were the walls,
Okay.
trying to make sure the wall is consistent.
Mhm.
And they've got a lot of issues with their walls. Some of their walls are on the property line. Some are a couple feet off. Some are actually 3 and 4 feet away. So it's a matter of how we construct our wall in concert with their walls and trying to make this thing look like
And-
it's a cohesive wall.
So would windows from one home potentially look into windows from another home? On any level, second or
They
third?
have 3-story windows. Again, we
Okay.
have none.
Okay,
There are windows in the first and second floors of both homes.
yeah,
And also the developer, Tommy Frankel, did also say, we do have a minimum landscape plan that we've submitted. There'll more than likely be additional landscaping provided as he tries to market these units because as he said, it takes landscaping to sell. And these are very high-end luxury units. So additional landscaping will more than likely be provided.
Very, very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next,
Miss April Sovich.
It's a beautiful project, by the way. Do you like it? Of course, the concerns when construction starts, where there'll be access for the construction workers, the parking, and the equipment. Are they going to come in off of US 1 or Ocean Drive? First question. Second comment would be the noise, the days and hours are allowed to work. And then the biggest question is where there'll be an engineer inspecting our units to the north, Old Town Road and Juno Dunes to the south for any possible cracks or damages that's done by any excavation or vibrations from the equipment. Because apparently at one point we had some damage from the community across the street on US 1, the Hemingway Road. Somebody in one of our buildings had some damage in the past, I was told. That was before I moved in. And then the last question is the location of the equipment relative to the property when it's under construction. Thank you.
Frank, you could probably address some of those concerns, right? Because the town has oversight during the construction and has to meet our requirements.
Right, so for construction hours, they're gonna meet the regular requirements that we have. The board or council can make recommendations or council can actually dictate otherwise. But right now, I believe Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. Saturdays, I believe it's 8 to 5. Don't quote me on Saturday, and no work on Sunday or legal holidays. Again, the board may make a recommendation about that, and council can add it as a condition of approval. Where they're gonna enter US 1 Ocean Drive, more than likely, it's going to be Ocean Drive. Unless they get a permit from Palm Beach County or DOT for US 1 and get a temporary access, similar to what we did with the vacant lot, the vacant parking lot right now that we have. They have a 6-month temporary access from US 1. It's something that can be worked on, but that's up to the applicant. I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank on the other questions. We were talking about pulling out, looking at the access right there. So this is because we are we bought it 2 years ago. But right, and then here comes the car because it is on a curve. So just keep that in mind. US 1 might be a better. You have 2 lanes on that side instead of 1. Just my opinion. The other one that I'm really concerned with is inspection videos or pictures of our existing conditions of our. I got that one.
For excavation on vibration cracks.
Sure. This is actually something that we always tell them, like you can make that request of the applicant. but you should always do it yourself. You don't want somebody else videotaping your home. You know what corner you want to videotape, you know what side of the wall you want to videotape, take pictures of. That's always been staff's recommendation. They can do it. When they come in for a building permit, they're actually going to be insured, in case something happens. That's always public records. We can always share that with you. But at that point, that does become a civil matter. That's why it's always our recommendation that you go to your house yourself and you videotape and you take pictures yourself of your surroundings and make sure you have that date on the picture. I have not seen them ever do it. Not them, but the applicant ever do that. No.
Next.
And Basso?
Ann Basso, 765 Hibiscus Avenue. I have 3 quick questions. What is on the west side of the property? Retaining walls on the north and south. What's on the west on US 1?
I need the mic.
Oh.
It's actually retaining walls as well. That's shown on the site plan, but on the west side, because the height of the retaining wall is 8 feet, is going to be a tier retaining wall. So you can actually see that on the second page of the site plan. It goes 4 feet, 2 feet, or maybe 2.5 in, an additional 4 feet up.
Next one's for you too. Okay, what constitutes a special exception? Why is this a special exception to the zoning when it appears to meet all the requirements?
That code section that Kurt discussed about the plan unit development, the 8 criteria that the board has to look at, that actually states that a plan unit development, because they're asking for a flexibility, gets treated as a special exception.
And my third question, which I didn't really understand, Jim Ferguson asked it. The property goes up, slopes up, and then slightly slopes back down toward US 1. If you look at the elevations on there. Are you going to allow them to flatten that dune like you're going to on Venus? Or are they going to have to build into the contour of what's there?
Right, so again, if we go back to the material, when you look at the survey, the one with the colors, you actually see that on the ocean side drive, it starts around 17, maybe 18, goes up all the way to 38, 39, very close to 40, right around the middle, and then it drops down. This is pretty much what it looks like if you look at the section of the lot going east to west. So what they're proposing on doing is that the top of it, that 39, they're gonna drop that around 10 feet, and they're gonna move that field that they have there to the west side of the property. Because they have,
Still going to flatten that dune.
they're going to,
Knock it down 10 feet.
they're gonna flat the middle of it, and they're gonna move it to the west side. They're doing that so that they can match the grade from Old Town Lane and Juno Dunes. Otherwise, if you leave it as is, you have an elevation of 39. They're asking for 2 to 3 stories. Now you're looking close to 70, 80 above sea level.
I have one more thing for the chairman, because normally I would be here, but in case I don't get to comment on the next item, I know this isn't, because I have to leave early tonight, I have gone through the comp plan. If you would give one to everybody, I've gone through the whole comp plan, 127 pages, and I've marked and highlighted things for each of y'all as they are required for Pelican Lake. I have not gone through the whole comp plan on everything. But anyway, that's for the next item in case I'm not here, so you will have it.
I received no additional comments.
There are no additional comments? All right. Board discussion. Okay. Does somebody want to make a motion to approve?
I make a motion to approve the project Ocean One as discussed. And there were no changes.
And subject to staff conditions.
Subject to staff conditions.
Subject to staff conditions.
I'll second that motion.
Have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? No, no opposed. It passes unanimously. It's approved.
Thank you.
And you have a presentation, Frank?
No, not for the last one.
Okay.
Aye.
Yes.
Oh, thank you. Okay, so the next item is an update on the comprehensive development plan review process. At the last meeting, at the last town council meeting, staff provided town council with different options or approaches to look into how we can review the comprehensive plan in the future. Out of the 4 options that staff provided, council decided to go with the hybrid approach. The hybrid approach is in your memorandum, which, and we also have a tentative schedule on how we plan on doing this. The key part of the hybrid approach is that it keeps the public and local planning agency, which is the Planning and Zoning Board, hands-on from the get-go with this process. The first thing that we would do is go to RFP to see if we can get a planning consultant to come in. Staff's already working on that RFP. We're looking at hopefully getting it out this week. More than likely, we'll bring a recommendation to town council at the August meeting. And depending on how much time we have and then the consultant, we would be bringing that back to the Planning and Zoning Board on September, if not October. What staff did is that we have provided you with a copy, a clean copy that we call it right now, is of the comprehensive plan that includes all the changes that we made. We did remove the strike-throughs so that way you could just see the new language, but we left the color-coded part of it inside so that way you can see why we made those changes to address what type of comment. And that's how, I don't want to say that those are like hands-off, but the state just approved those specific changes to the comprehensive development plan. We can't change it, but it would have to still meet their criteria.
So you're saying the part that's underlined?
The part that's underlined, the part that's red, blue, and I think I added green, no? Red, blue, and purple. Yes. So because those were the changes that staff made to address the objection and recommendation report from the ORC report from the state, the peril of flood, and also the 2006 EAR report as well. So the point for this from staff is that we wanted to give you the comprehensive plan now, so that way you have more than enough time to look at it. I'm happy to say that the comp plan itself, without the figures, is close to 70 pages now that we removed all the strike-throughs. So, it's no 3-digit number anymore. So that way the board can have enough time to take a look at it. Staff is going to do, the RFP process. We're going to look into getting a consultant. Once the consultant and staff, worked on something together to actually start what's on the proposed schedule, which is the review of, I believe, is the introduction, comprehensive development plan, and future land use plan. We're looking at having that possibly in September, maybe October. So that's why this schedule is tentative. But again, the reason of why we're bringing this today is so that way you have more than ample time to look at the comprehensive plan as a whole. Thank you.
Comments from staff?
No. Oh, I'm sorry.
Did you wish to take public comments on that item? Because I believe Ann Basso wanted to speak on that item.
Oh, I'm sorry. You have something further?
Yeah.
Hand it out.
Michael, I have questions on this, but unless
Oh,
you,
go ahead.
okay. Frank, I've got several questions for you. In your memorandum, one of the things you state is that the consultant will provide minimal feedback. Could you clarify what that means, minimal feedback?
In the beginning, because this is the hybrid approach, this is not that the consultant is taking care of the project, the majority of the project. So this is the hybrid approach. So in the beginning, it's going to be the LPA, staff bringing this to the LPA to discuss element by element as discussed on the schedule. And the consultant, on the way we are planning on putting on the RFP, is that the consultant will be available for those meetings to answer any questions. But the beginning part of it is going to be staff taking the lead on it. And then once we're done taking questions, comments, putting all the documents together, that's when we're going to give that document to the consultant.
Right. My question really is, in the course of a meeting, the consultant is sitting in the room here with us all.
Correct.
Okay. Will members of the Planning and Zoning Board be able to address questions to the consultant and get
Definitely.
responses?
Yes.
And
yes.
is there some kind of time limit when you say the word minimal? Is there a
No,
time
no.
limit, or is that it's going to be an open discussion process?
We're looking at 2, 3, the way that staff is looking at this for the RFP, because we're thinking that they're going to charge us by the hour. A ball estimate that we're throwing out there, because we're not going to discuss infrastructure for 3 hours. You know, we're thinking that each meeting on average might take 2 to 3 hours.
Okay.
So that's what we're putting in the RFP. But yes, the consultant will be here to answer the questions. But the way that we're putting it on the RFP is that staff will be the lead for the beginning of that input, the input process.
So Frank, so
Go ahead, Dee.
so the process, let's say there's an element I want to add to conservation. What's the process for me submitting that proposed language?
If you're talking about a whole new element,
No, an additional policy or paragraph to a section.
just whenever we get to that element, that's when you would bring up your comments.
So I should type it up and say, here's my proposed whatever, and Len
You
can
can give me,
review it?
you can
or-
do it any way that you want. You can give me a call.
Well, I would want to document it, so I'm not sure if it's best to present it to you in an email ahead of time or distribute it like Ann just did with her suggestions. Do you have a preferred process?
Ahead of time, always ahead of time.
Okay, and should I summarize mine like this also and just give it to you in a document to distribute?
I did not get a time to take a look at Ann's, but
Right.
I mean, really, if I
Something
have any
similar.
questions on it, if the consultant has any questions on it, Kurt will give you a call. As long as it's, conversation, one-way conversation, we're fine.
So then we'll discuss it in the meeting and then as a group decide if those should be added or not added, or how do those items that any of us suggest get vetted?
Well, actually, that was something that we did bring up. There's a way that we can pretty much just put all the comments in, good, bad, whatever, it doesn't matter. We can just add all of those in there and have the professional, the consultant say, okay, this one makes sense. This one might not make sense because so and so and so. So we can do that approach. We can talk about it right at the meeting, but it would be up to the chair to see if he wants to do a different approach. But I believe that the way the staff discussed it is that we're going to take all the comments in. We're going to draft up our comp plan with all the comments. And that's one of the last things in the schedule that says that, review of all comments, provide final feedback. Staff is going to put all the comments into one readable document. So even after you give the comments, staff is going to put all of that together, and we're still going to meet at least one more time to go over the entire plan as a whole.
I assume when you get anything sent to you, be it Dee Dee or somebody else, it will immediately come to the rest of us rather than wait for the meeting?
That shouldn't be a problem? No, should not
I
be a
can send
problem.
it out, yes.
We can do that, of course.
That gives us time to review it too.
Very helpful.
Frank, I'd like to continue with my questions.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so following up on this specific point, your report says staff will take note of the comments and recommendations and provide them to the consultant for review. It would seem appropriate to me that before you give your report to the consultant, you bring your summary first to P&Z and ask us to review it to see if we agree with your interpretation of comments we may have made.
Yes, that's how I have it on the schedule.
Okay,
Yeah, so staff will put together all comments into one readable document, and then we're gonna bring it back to the Planning and Zoning Board, for a final review.
okay. Following
Would
along
see
on
that
this.
ahead of time?
Hmm?
That would be part of what you would send to us ahead of time?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So Frank, following up on this, if I understand your process for creating this document, you're going to wait until we've had all of our meetings over the course of the next 8 months or however many months it may be, and then create this summary. May I suggest that it might be more appropriate to give us the summary of the previous meeting each month? Just as we see minutes at the end of each meeting, it's fresh in our minds. If you wait until 8 months later to say, what did I mean when I said that 8 months ago, that could be confusing. Would there be any problem with giving us a summary at each meeting of the previous?
I could try my best to put something together. I know a month seems like a lot of time, but sometimes when
8 months is a lot of time.
no, but if I'm giving you updates from last month, staff will try its best to do so. Yes.
Okay, I think that might be helpful. Okay, in your memorandum, you state the consultant will provide objectives and policies in support of provided information. I'm wondering, how is the consultant going to be able to come up with a single recommendation if, for example, Dee Dee proposes X and I propose Y and they're completely opposite? So what do we do in a case like this? What's the professional's role? What is your role in resolving conflicting recommendations?
It's if it's about the same subject and you have two different views on it, one might not be correct and the other one might be correct. It'll be staff's professional opinion to recommend one of the two. I don't know if that makes sense, but
Well, what's the role of the Planning and Zoning Board? Why would staff be making that decision?
well, we're still going to provide all of that to in the final document. But the reason we got a consultant is to get his professional opinion on that. I mean, we can provide all the options if that's something that you want to see.
I'm just wondering, if Dee Dee says raise the Pelican Lake by 6 feet and I say drain Pelican Lake, staff is going to make the decision which to tell the consultant to propose.
The professional is going to make that's the reason why we're hiring a professional.
Okay.
Yes.
Again, though, it's a recommendation. I mean, the board could disagree. I
Sure,
mean, the board
exactly.
could say, we recommend town council drain Pelican Lake, even though, so the board can always recommend what it wishes. It's just,
So P and Z would be able to step in at that point and it
Yeah,
won't just be up, because you're saying,
because
Frank,
it's
it's
the
up to
board's,
staff.
because you're the local planning agency, it's ultimately the board's recommendation. Staff and the professional their purpose is to assist this board.
I understand.
So it's the board's recommendation. I mean, so the professional might say A, everyone here says B, the recommendation of the board would be B. Now, you might want to know that the professional says A, just so the council's aware, but the recommendation would be B.
That makes sense. So that's a
I'll
little
take that
bit
back
different from
then.
what you're saying, Frank, and that staff is going to make the determination.
No, then we'll note it.
Okay.
We'll make, just like you have your comments, that will have their own comments as well.
Okay, good. Next point. Your proposed timeline, month by month, suggests that we take 1 or 2 chapters of the plan per session. Okay. I guess I'm wondering, suppose 3 months after we've discussed chapter 2, I have a bright idea and I want to go back and suggest something in chapter 2. Will there be flexibility for me to do that?
That's up to the chair, but yes, this whole process to us is flexible. The schedule is tentative. I don't believe if we passed it, you can't give comments anymore. I would definitely take those comments in at any time.
Okay, so
You can discuss it. I mean,
Michael, as chair, would you agree that that's a fair step if
As long as staff can accommodate it, I think it's fine.
or it's just a suggestion that you might
Yeah.
want to make? Good, thank you. Next point, I guess. We know certain of these chapters, I think we know, certain of these chapters are going to generate much more public interest than others. We know, for example, that environmental issues have been a hotly debated topic in the town in the past few months. So what happens on the evening when we're doing conservation, for example? What happens if we decide that this is such a big issue and we have 25 different suggestions? We can't possibly get through them all in one evening without staying past 11 p.m. Would you suggest that there should be flexibility to say, we will defer the rest of conservation to the next meeting and move the whole schedule ahead by 1 month? Or is this a rigid schedule that we're absolutely locked into?
As I mentioned, it's not rigid.
Okay.
Correct.
Good. Okay. Following on the same lines, we know that there's certain topics. Let's pick conservation again. We know that there's an ecology group in town that will probably have a lot to suggest to us. We have a new organization in town called the Juno Beach Conservancy, which is very, very interested in conservation areas, natural areas, and so on. When we have people in the public who we know have done a lot of research and have a great interest in a particular topic, I'm wondering what we're going to do in terms of being able to hear these people. Now, normally we would have a 3-minute rule, which makes good sense for general public comments. But in a case like this, we're effectively rewriting a document that hasn't undergone serious scrutiny for well over a decade. So can we develop, or can I propose a procedure whereby for certain topics, if I as a member or Michael as the chair or all of us as a board decide we would like to give a certain amount of time to a group that suggests that they'd like some floor time, they have some slides to show us, they have some solid proposals to make on this particular chapter, how do we go about giving them that time and modify the 3-minute cloture rule?
That'll be up to the chair.
Well, Michael, what do you think?
Well, we are noticed it's necessary to have 2 meetings within 1 month, if I'm correct. And that might be part of a solution.
They're talking about total time. I guess my point is a little bit different. I'm saying, for example, person X, who we know has done a great deal of research into who knows what, gopher tortoises in the natural areas, and they feel that they have important information that they would like us to know. They would like it on the public record, and they would like to explain to us at a slideshow about why gopher tortoises is such an important issue. How do we, as a board, go about saying, for this particular meeting coming up, we would like to give this person 10 minutes to do a slide presentation and give us some background information, since we all agree, all of us here.
It might be useful if we have a group wishing to make such a presentation, that first we be notified in advance and give us an idea of what it is, all right?
Very good.
And then we can look at it, and that might save time if the board gets to read that first. And perhaps then the board would be in a position to question them.
Sounds very good to me.
Yeah.
Good way to go. So we're not limited by our 3-minute rule necessarily.
Correct.
Excellent. Thanks. Let me see if I have another question here. No, I think those are my questions. Thank you very much.
No further questions, comments from staff?
We have a public
Oh, I'm
comment.
sorry, Ann, you're so patient, please.
This falls right into what Jim was just talking about, someone who put a lot of time and effort into what's going to probably take more than 2.5 minutes. I was allowed to speak longer at the council meeting last week because of the work that's here, but you can briefly go through it. Again, I went through the 127 pages. As it pertained to Pelican Lake only, I will go through the rest of the comp plan and make comments along the way. But right now, Pelican Lake seems to be the big concern of most of town. And this comp plan addresses it throughout. There are specifics that need to be done, I think, that staff has not done over the years. Things that were spelled out in here. I asked Lynn, again, reiterate, if you don't follow the comp plan, what are the consequences? I mean, for town not doing it? What are the consequences to the town? Can they get fined? Can they get?
No, they're not fined. Well, generally, the comp plan is a tool to guide future development. So if a development is approved that doesn't comply with the comp plan, there's actually a cause of action under the Florida statutes where any action the town takes inconsistent with the comp plan can be challenged through that process. That's generally how it works.
Okay, so, I mean, it can be challenged, but in which way? I mean, how is it?
It would be a legal proceeding.
Okay.
Essentially, yeah.
Because there are a lot of things in here. Policy, we can start on this. Policy 6.8 does not include filling of submerged land along Pelican Lake by homeowners. Does this include? I've asked the question. Because it says that they're to follow all applicable federal and state regulations. They have been, there are 2, maybe 3 lots, but 2 really recently. The big greenhouse put rocks, filled Pelican Lake, and they've got that big rock seawall, and that new construction has that beach. And again, they filled part of, if you look on the on PAPA or the overall survey of town, you can see that those houses on the lake have submerged land that's included in their property value, actually in the property boundaries. And have y'all been following federal and state regulations on these dredge and fill permits and so forth? Okay. It's just something that we need to keep in mind, and that they're very carefully, actually. The next page, policy 8.23, annually monitor the water quality of Pelican Lake. I think the ecology group and some other people have requested this information several times from town, and have you not yet gotten a satisfactory answer? Where is where are the records of this monitoring of the water quality, or has it been done? And if it hasn't in the past, it seems that that's the case, what are we going to do about it in the future from now on? It's in the comp plan, it should be followed. Next one, under conservation, town should develop and maintain, updated when necessary. Okay, it talks about to improve the water quality of the surface waters of Pelican Lake. What is being done? I know now that they are hiring consultants, they're interviewing consultants and so forth, but we need to follow the comp plan here, make sure that it stays in the comp plan, that nothing's removed as far as that's concerned, and that we are following it. There's surplus money available, a lot of it. They were talking about building a 240,000 event center out here. Surplus money can be, I've done some research on it, surplus money can be used for landscaping, or it's a capital improvement in town. I believe that Pelican Lake is one of our town's biggest assets. The improvement of Pelican Lake, I really do think can be used, this surplus money can be used. In fact, the whole perimeter of it, any re-landscaping, plantings along the lake could be used with the surplus money and would not have to come out of town's funds or the residents' pockets. Policy 1.3 should be limited, again, addresses water quality. 1.4
we
addresses
have this in writing from you.
Okay, so y'all can look at, you don't need me, but if y'all would, I do ask the board to please look at this carefully and
we will
make sure that it stays in here.
I will.
Head on to the next, reviewing the rest of the comp plans for other aspects of it. Thank you very much.
Welcome.
So,
Comments from staff?
actually, I
Just-
have,
I have a follow-up as well.
you want to go?
Go ahead.
So Frank, I have a question regarding this comp plan element for policy 4.2 regarding the Ocean One development. So this element said, continue to require preservation, conservation, and priority use of native vegetation. So in looking at that site plan and staff basically, I guess, recommending that it be approved, the percentages were 50.3 and 50.4 use of native vegetation submitted by the applicant. So how, I mean, so you don't really hold them to priority use because priority use would be 60% or 70%, not 50.3. So how do you interpret this as acceptable? And one of the questions I'll be asking, not just about this element, but others, are how do we better define these to better serve the purpose? Because obviously priority use is too vague and most developers aren't going to heed any vague language.
Right, so when you see that goal or objective in the comp plan,
Yeah.
like you said, it's not clear. The goal is not supposed to be the direction. So what staff did years ago is that they created a landscape section in the code of ordinance. So if you go to that code section, they actually say that it has to be at least 50%. Whether 50% is enough or not, I'm not here to make to give you my opinion on that. But because of that section of the comp plan, we created a landscape section of the code, and then that's actually what talks about the native, the height of palm trees, the height of bushes, when you can do a minor amendment to the landscape plan, site visibility triangle that was brought up before. So all those specifics are in chapter 34 of the Code of Ordinance.
I see. So as we, as a group, look more acutely at the comprehensive plan, we need to take into consideration those ordinances because perhaps we would be recommending something that has like, you know, an ancillary factor to consider. And we don't want to go randomly changing ordinances, but I guess we should have that document by our sides as well in some cases. Does that make sense or?
Well, the code has to be consistent with the comp plan. So as Frank
and
said, the
this-
code implements the comp plan. So if major changes to the comp plan may require changes to the code.
So,
that's-
so we need to really look at those two things in parallel to some extent.
To some extent, but look, if the comp plan says X, then, this is our goal, then.
So we might
if we
have to
changed the
tighten
code,
up
we
that
might have to change the
ordinance.
code.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
There
thank
might be
you.
code changes that come out of this, and that's
Okay.
perfectly fine.
Okay, thank you.
Michael, Frank, can I just go back and revisit something for a second? Because I know I'm not clear on it. Are you expecting the Planning and Zoning Board to vote on all suggestions? Or is that something where, as again, 2 or 3 people can come up with conflicting suggestions and it simply gets reported as 3 different people have thought of 3 different things?
The board can come up, again, if you don't agree, I'll put all the comments in there. If the board decides to come up with some sort of consensus during that time, I'll put the consensus in.
Okay. That sounds
You're
good.
always free to make a motion.
Of course.
To that.
Yep.
To that end.
And Frank, the comp plan, as you've given us in this document, this is the one we're going to use as a basis for reference going forward. Am I right?
Correct.
Okay. Will you post this on the website?
Oh.
Otherwise, the public's not going to know how to
I would
interact.
want to wait until the state actually gives me the
course.
okay
Right.
before we put anything in the website. We do have a little section on the planning and zoning that says comp plan and says, unfortunately, it's being worked on.
Right.
That's why we don't have it up there. Once the state gives the go ahead, I can put it up there. I can PDF it and make it ADA compatible.
When do we anticipate the state's approval coming through?
It may take up to 45 days after the day that we submit it. We submitted last week, like Monday of last week.
So that should be good in terms of the calendar that you proposed. In other words, by the time of the first meeting, the public should be able to see what we're going to be discussing.
Sure.
Good. Thank you.
Finally, Frank. Comments from staff.
Just to come, upcoming calendar dates, the next town council meeting is July 22nd, Wednesday at 5:30, and the next planning and zoning board meeting is August 3rd at 5:30, which is a Monday.
Comments from the board? There being
I
none,
have a
I move
comment.
to
Wait,
adjourn.
Wait,
Yeah.
wait. Forgot about me down here. So Frank, I have a question. I had seen in the activity report that wants to change or looking at changing zoning on the wetlands west of Coconut Avenue. Could you tell us a little about that?
I wouldn't call them wetlands just yet, but yes, the Palm Beach County owns 3 different parcels west of Coconut Avenue. That's where New Palm Beach Heights is. And they have asked staff to start looking into the process to change the zoning designation and the future land use to environmental sensitive lands and future land use to conservation.
Which means it wouldn't be buildable.
Right.
That's correct.
Would not be developable.
So how
Not-
does that get decided on? Is that, excuse me,
It
guys,
comes-
excuse me.
Yeah, sorry.
Does
It-
that come before planning and zoning?
Yes, it's a rezoning and a future land use change, so it does come before planning and zoning. It is one of your duties, correct?
Okay, thank you. And one other thing, with the Loggerhead Marine Life Center building project, is that plan sit with Juno Beach to approve, or is that a county?
That plan has been reviewed and approved by the town,
Was approved.
2016 maybe?
Right, right.
Yes, and they asked for extensions.
So all the
throughout.
inspections and everything come through Juno Beach?
Correct.
So do you know what's happening with the outfall? In the past, or I should say outflow from the turtle tanks, that was flowing out, into the beach area there.
Right.
Will they still have that outflow of water from the tanks with the new design, or is it being brought further away from the beach? Because now the water volume is going to be increased, and I'm concerned from a pollution and safety point of view, because sometimes there were upwellings and kids playing in that water.
Right, it's a filter system. It got approval from the state that you actually need to approval from the state to have that. So they had one previously, and they currently have one for the proposed filtration system. I cannot recall, honestly, I'm sorry, 4 years ago.
Okay. Just
where it
wondering.
ends.
Okay.
Yes, but this was actually brought up as a comment back when we reviewed the plan in
Yeah.
2015, 2016.
And was approved by this board.
That's correct.
I see. Okay, thank you. That's all. Now you can adjourn.
We are adjourned.
Okay, I second the motion.
We're adjourned.